Leadership Center 2024 webinar series. Today we're going to be covering essential tech updates for non-tech nonprofit leaders with our presenter Kelly Hecht from Amazon Web Services. A little bit about our presenter. Kelly, a skilled nonprofit leader with more than 20 years of diverse experience. Her superpower is honoring where leaders are today and supporting their journey towards a vision of where they need to be to deliver on the future we need tomorrow. Blending her previous roles as a senior leader with the American Cancer Society and a premier nonprofit consulting agency, Kelly serves as an executive advisor on the global health and nonprofit team at Amazon Web Services. Leveraging the full resources of more than 45 divisions across Amazon, she aims to increase cloud awareness and ensure today's nonprofit leaders know how to leverage technology to drive fundraising, marketing, mission impact, and innovation. I will be your moderator today. My name is Isabella, and I'm the Program Operations Manager here at Nonprofit Leadership Center of Tampa Bay. And then just some rules of the road. To minimize background noise and distractions, all lines will be muted for the duration of the webinar. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. We warmly welcome your questions, so please type them in the chat box. Kelly will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. We're looking forward to a productive, engaging session, and thank you so much for your participation. Stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a fun thing to sit and listen to someone read about you. Not at all awkward. You guys, thank you so much for taking some time out of your days. There is a lot going on in the world and certainly in our industry. And so I appreciate you spending a few minutes with us. I'm going to ask that to get us started, because this is a pretty modest group, that we can have some good interaction. If people wouldn't mind starting by just writing in the chat, where are you coming to the call from today? What city or state are you in? And what sort of lens do you bring? Do you sit in a marketing function? Do you sit in an operations function? While I go ahead and pull up some visuals for us to walk through today, I'd love to have you go ahead and share that with me. Let's see what we've got here. We've got Clearwater, Florida. My friends were just there for spring break. Such beautiful area. Tampa, love it. Got some volunteer. We have a CEO, a board member. Thank you, board member, for taking the time to expand your knowledge. Manatee County, amazing. All great stuff. I love this. Thank you guys so much. All right, so heavy Florida, as we would expect, given our hosts today. I am coming to you actually from Brooklyn, New York, where I have spent the bulk of my career in nonprofit, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Despite the fact that I live and work in New York, I have spent my career serving nonprofits across the country, quite a bit of time in Florida, in the healthcare sector and in the general nonprofit sector. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The topic for today is about the essentials of technology, and it's an ironic topic for me personally to be talking about, because I am what many would consider sort of a late adopter of tech. And here I am working for one of the largest tech companies in the world. And that was really by design. So the things that I'm going to share with you are shared from a place of vulnerable self-awareness. I try very hard to own and talk about the things that have been difficult for me, the learning curves that I have faced in my career and I'm still facing in my current role. The proverbial no stupid questions is sort of the vibe for today. And so, as it was invited at the beginning with the ground rules, please feel free as we move through this, since unfortunately you're all on mute and we can't be in a room together, to use the chat bot to go ahead and put questions in. I will answer as many of them as I can today, and those that I can't, I will follow up with after the fact. So I just changed the slide. Can I get a thumbs up that came through? Okay, great. So here's the intention for our time together, just so that you can make sure that this is going to be a good use of your time. I'm going to start a little bit by giving you the lens that I bring to the conversation. So that's to say the perspective from which I'm sharing. I think it's really important that we own those elements in conversation, so that we can look for elements of bias or experience that may be informing the perspective that I'm going to share with you or any speaker may hear. So I'll tell you a little bit about me and how I got to where I am today to be able to be sharing some content with you. Then I'm going to talk about some basics. So anyone on the call, if you are really familiar with the cloud, if you are deep into understanding how the technology at AWS and other cloud providers works, this part should feel really familiar to you. Feel free to respond to some emails during it. If you don't, then you're going to be like me, and I'm going to give you sort of the Cliff Note version of some things I have learned over the last 2 years in my role, and try to do so in a way that I really hope and encourage that you will then take and share with your teams, share with any other communities that you're part of in our sector, because these basic elements of understanding I'm finding are an incredibly important aspect in leveling the playing field as it relates to the way that we're going to be going about and achieving our missions in the coming years. Now, once we have the basics, I'm going to talk about some distinctions. A lot of language, a lot of terms thrown around. Dare I say, sometimes there can be a little gaslighting in the technical space where people are throwing around terms and it's awkward to say, I have no idea what that means. And I'm seeing a lot of this in the use in the discussion around AI right now and generative AI. So we're going to talk about what that really is, distinguish some facts from fiction, and provide you guys with hopefully better tools and information to be able to support conversations that are taking place across your organizations, across committees that you serve on, networks that you're part of. We're going to make you into little evangelists through this process. Then I'm going to talk through a framework, something that hopefully will help you in your role as you're looking to increase your technical acumen, increase your technical sophistication, assess tools and resources that might be available to you. And then last but not least, I'll end with a couple of resources that I think you'll find useful in propelling that moving forward. So hopefully that feels like a good use of your time. We've got a fair amount to cover in a little less than an hour. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So this is me. Anyone who I'm connected to on LinkedIn probably saw this picture of me last week. We have a big event every year called the Imagine Conference, where we bring together about 600 nonprofit leaders from around the world to talk about different topics that are top of mind or taking place across the industry. And on this particular year, we had the benefit of a very special keynote in the First Lady who decided to join us, Dr. Jill Biden. But in doing so, we had to have Secret Service screen every single one of the more than 600 people that came through the door, including all the way down to like taking the tops off of chopsticks. So we were not expecting that. And as a result, the line got really long. And so we called upon a leadership principle that we have at Amazon, which is customer obsession. And the next thing you knew, about 5 of us were grabbing the food that was on the inside and bringing it to the folks standing in line on the outside and passing out banana bread and coffee while folks patiently waited to get in and get to hear the content throughout the day. So that's a silly little story behind the picture of me there. The way that I identify is as a mom. I try really hard to be vocally self-critical and a humble learner in my role. I'm really proud of my tenure at the American Cancer Society, where I served for about 10 years at both the city level, which back then was called the region, and then the division level, which was the state level, and then ultimately I worked at the National Home Office. I worked at a consulting agency for about 15 years, and got to work with all sorts of different organizations across our space there. I love to travel. I am a fairly late adopter of technology, which you'll learn about me. And one of the things to also keep in mind is I am a white woman who lives in New York and comes from a place of privilege. And so while I work really hard to expand my knowledge and to engage different perspectives, it is good for you all to know that, that these are the experiences that have informed what I bring to the table today. And so I invite every conversation and every piece of perspective that we can, because that really enriches the dialogue as we move forward. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about me, Let's talk about the basics. So in the chat tool, I just want to hear from folks, low, medium, or high. How comfortable is your knowledge around what the cloud actually is when you hear that phrase? Cloud technology, cloud services. All right, we've got some highs, couple highs, a lot of mediums, couple lows, mostly mediums. Okay. So some of this will likely be reframed, certainly for the highs and maybe even for some of the mediums, but ideally everyone will take away a little something. So when I first started at AWS, Amazon Web Services, which for those that aren't aware, it's a division of Amazon. It is the largest and most widely adopted cloud provider in the world. And everyone was throwing all of these immense technical terms at me. There was a ton of training when I started. You spend the first 3 months like really head down learning. And I was getting pretty quickly overwhelmed. And then I encountered a leader who said, I really think that the best way to think about the cloud is not for what it is, but for what it allows you to do. And the light bulb went off. And that really stuck for me. And so as a result, when I talk to audiences and communities, and I encourage you as you leave today and talk to others, to carry that through line. So don't think about what the cloud is. Don't worry about the 250 different services. Lots of people can talk to you about that down the road. But instead, think about the things that being in the cloud, utilizing the cloud, embracing that aspect of technology allows you to do. And the thing I'm going to walk you through is an Amazon shopping experience, which most people have experienced today. So Amazon as a retail entity was started, it was the genesis for AWS as a company. They were building this retail site back then to sell books. And what they realized is that the technology that they had created to power this web-enabled tool was actually in and of itself a distinct set of solutions that would add value to companies across the world. And that was how AWS was formed about 15 years ago. So what are some of the things that the cloud allows us to do? First and foremost is storage. So you can imagine when you go to Amazon, there are millions and millions and millions of photos and reviews and feedbacks and pricing and all of these details that are stored in the cloud. So when you think about your program, if you are an arts and culture org, you might have archival footage that you need to store. If you have a heavy fundraising program, you might have data that sits in your CRM that you don't use because it's 10, 15 years old. You don't want to delete it, but you might choose to store it differently. Any of your shared documents that you're using as a business, right? As a nonprofit business, as you're creating PowerPoints and videos and things of that nature. So storage is probably the most common use and area that the cloud is known for. The second would be security and disaster recovery, which can include something called computing and processing. So the way that I would explain this in the Amazon environment is I have a secure login in order to access my app or to access it through the web-based browser, right? That security is extraordinarily important because there's a lot of information in my Amazon account, where I live, what my credit card information is, what type of products I like to buy. So that security, ironically, even though I have it listed as the second bullet, at Amazon, they call it job zero, which is to say there is no job more important than security. And part of security is having a disaster recovery plan, which means if there is some catastrophic event, if systems shut down, do you have the ability to access what you have stored quickly and easily so that you have no latency in that experience there. So security and disaster recovery are really important parts of that, as are computing and processing. That's the ability to render a page fast from anywhere. So you think about the fact that when you do a search on Amazon, the way that page reloads is pretty impressive. And wouldn't it be great if all of our experiences internally and externally for our constituents were the same? Data unification is an area that's becoming more and more important. You may have heard the phrase data lake or data warehouse, or sometimes people are now saying things like data mesh or data web. All comments or all language that you may have heard. There are various forms of basically bringing data together from different places. So again, using the Amazon shopping experience as a representative example, there are lots of different suppliers and storefronts, if you will, that use the Amazon front door as a way to access. So that unification of data is something that is utilized. In our sector, we often see it where an offline fundraising program and an online fundraising program might have data sets in two different places. We still live in a world where much of our data is sadly living on spreadsheets on laptops. So how do we bring that data into an environment that we can use more? The data unification is really important because we're now getting into the world of machine learning and AI. We did make it, I think, a whole 10 minutes into this conversation before I referenced it. It is everywhere we go right now. And being able to utilize some of that machine learning or some of those AI-powered tools is more powerful when we have unified data, is more powerful when we have high computing, is easier and safer when we have good security, right? So you can see how these things all build on each other. And then finally, analytics and modeling. And so at AWS, at least, there are more than 200 different tools that exist within the cloud solution set. And the combinations of them create endless experiences of things that you are able to then go ahead and do. So let's see in the chat, did anyone learn anything new in what I just shared? Is that a recap or did we learn a couple new things? Hopefully some of our low friends at least walked away. Okay, thanks, Mark Smith. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so a lot of people often ask me, why is someone like me, Kelly, who comes from a marketing and fundraising background, who self-identifies as a later adopter of technology, who candidly did not know much about the cloud before I joined AWS 2 years ago, why am I talking about this? And why am I often talking about this to people that don't serve in an IT function? Because historically, the cloud has really been something that IT owned or was held responsible for, or was considered the expert in. And the reason is because these are all examples of ways that adopting cloud capabilities, adopting the technology available through the cloud, can help improve an organization. So it can help reduce staff burnout and employee churn, something that we are navigating a lot right now, something that is certainly increased as it relates to the balance of remote and in-office work environments. Another thing to think about is it really can help us better determine where and what our supporters want to hear from us. So we've all spent many, many months, weeks, years trying to get our segmentation right, trying to get our messaging right. There are tools available to us like data unification, like analysis and modeling, like AI and machine learning that can help us be even smarter and more strategic in that messaging, in that segmentation. And so that's a really key area to focus on. There is tremendous opportunity for business efficiencies that will increase our investment on mission. So one of the terms I use a lot when I talk about AI is operational efficiency. That is to say the proverbial goal of how do we work smarter, not harder, right? So these are areas where, again, the technology can be really powerful. It can help provide efficient and more personal experiences for our constituents and our users, as well as our staff. It can deliver enhanced experiences for our donors, our constituents, our volunteers, our supporters. And ultimately, it really equips us to test and learn, which can finally accelerate innovation. Oftentimes we talk about not having R&D budgets and not having resources for those things. And in a cloud-based environment, you really do have the ability to do that. So I share this all not necessarily to make a pitch for everyone to go get everything in the cloud, but instead for everyone to recognize that there is value in this technology in every aspect of our organizations, and to do so in a way that encourages people to think of it as a shared opportunity and not just the responsibility of IT, because that sharing is really going to be an essential part of the way that we adopt and move forward in our maturity and our sophistication in a modern day and age. Okay, so let's dive into some of the distinctions that I get asked about quite a bit. This is a graphic that I'm using a lot. You'll get these slides after the fact, but if you want to take a screenshot, I think this is a pretty good one to do. There's so much conversation happening right now about AI and generative AI, and I think it's really worthwhile to understand the distinction between them. And I think this slide does a decent job of distilling that. So artificial intelligence, it's really a technique that allows computers to mimic human intelligence. So that uses logic, and you can imagine it with sort of an if-then statement. A subset of artificial intelligence is something called machine learning. So you may hear the phrase AIML, that stands for artificial intelligence machine learning. That is a phrase that is talking about AI and a subset of AI called machine learning. The machine learning is really the part of the technology that looks for patterns. So it looks for any continuity, any trends, and then it actually builds logic around that so that it can start to model and get into, you may have heard, predictive elements. And that's where that machine learning comes into place. So as it relates to machine learning, because of the pattern, what you really want to look for is frequency. Machine learning is incredibly valuable for any aspect of your organization or your business or your area of responsibility that has repetition in what it does. A subset of machine learning is something called deep learning. And that is just really when you're starting to get into multiple layers of information and you're looking for trends across various aspects. So in this particular case, you're starting to maybe get into speech or image recognition, where in speech, there's both what I'm saying, the inflection with which I'm saying it. In an image recognition, there might be a person, a background, an animal, right? So those are the layers of deep learning. Then finally, generative AI, which is really having its heyday right now, is the ability for something to be created that wasn't there before because of the models that have been training and using the information provided. So in this particular case, a lot of conversation is going into these models like Claude, where you can enter what's called a prompt or a question, and you might say, tell me the best place to go skiing in April in the United States. And it's combing through millions and millions and millions of resources available publicly on the web to synthesize an answer to you. And the answer back to you is the newly created or the generated content. And the thing that I am finding really interesting around generative AI is so much of the conversation seems to be focused on content generation for donors, which can be fairly controversial depending on the role that you sit in. But keep a more open mind as you think about generative AI, because generative AI can be used to synthesize large sets of content. It can be used to summarize reporting across multiple platforms. Generative AI can be used to answer questions and look for those patterns in questions that are happening time and time again. So two areas of I think, two areas that I don't think are getting enough attention as it relates to generative AI are, for example, call centers. If you have a call center, if you work for an organization with a call center, there is tons of incredible application for generative AI in that space. Similarly, generative AI is something that we're looking at with a lot of HR departments, a lot of interesting abilities to create more self-service tools for employees using generative AI to help them find what they're looking for. So hopefully that information grounds people in a little bit more factual and contextual information around the different forms and use cases of artificial intelligence. And hopefully as folks start to talk about it, or if you find yourself at a dinner table, you can use some of the information you've shared today to continue to educate others as well. So why has it gotten so much attention recently? I think there's a lot of reasons. First and foremost, there are certainly some data sets that have become open, is the phrase that has been used over the last year that has made it far more powerful. With that, each time we're using generative AI, it's creating new additional opportunities. But the end result is truly that generative AI fosters even more creativity. It really can enhance productivity and it can drive economic growth, which for us is super important because that's dollars to mission. And what I love about this is that for once, in a rare moment, the barrier of cost is not a significant one. And so the nonprofit sector, even if it's a small nonprofit, really shouldn't have a disproportionate disadvantage in getting into the generative AI space because a lot of tools are available at no cost. And even the ones that do have a fee, it's usually quite minimal relative to the output that it can bring forward. So a lot of excitement is justified. There certainly is a lot of energy beyond the excitement that I think we would benefit from some of the factual groundings that hopefully you all are taking away from this conversation as well. This is an important conversation as it relates, or important visual as it relates to generative AI that I wanted to share with folks. So sometimes I hear people say that they've gotten stopped in the hallway and that someone said they've got to start using AI right away. We're going to talk in a minute about how to address those types of questions when you get them. The punchline is you're already using it, so don't worry. But it's important to keep in mind that we talked about some of those fundamental aspects of the cloud at the beginning of our time together. Things like storage, things like data unification, things like operational databases. It's really important to remember that any form of AI, whether it be machine learning or generative AI, requires there to be a foundation. It has to pull on something for that to be effective and enriched. This is not an example of like where your CRM and we're trying to have a single source of perfect clean data, as hard or maybe even impossible as that may be, but instead to simply say that there really are some prerequisites for responsible, ethical, and even effective use of AI in our organizations today. And so when we talk about the framework, we're going to look at some of those things just to ensure that we don't inadvertently put the cart before the horse or get distracted by the conversation du jour, which is certainly very much emphasizing generative AI, and that we're really making sure that those important and essential fundamentals are in place as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where you are today. So take a minute and read this list and count how many of these you are currently using. Spreadsheets, PowerPoint share tools, a shared doc format. Are you using any fundraising or event apps in your org? Are you using a peer-to-peer online fundraising platform? Do you have dashboards, analytics, and reporting tools? Do you have a CRM? A vendor, a partner, suppliers, consultants, are using any of those? So put into the chat, are you using all of these, some of these? I suppose if you're using none, you can tell me that too, but I find that hard to believe in today's day and age. Some of these, okay? Some 4, great. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Mark. Casey, a lot of these. 2 from Bill. Okay, great. So the reason that I share this list is because pretty much every one of these has some form of AI already included in it. AI has been around for more than 25 years. There are aspects that are new and enhanced over the last year, which is why you're seeing so much additional attention and conversation around it. But I can assure you that unless your answer to this was none, which I don't think I saw anyone with that answer, there is some form of AI that is already being integrated into the work that you're doing today. And I share that for 2 reasons. One is to try a little bit and diffuse some of what some have described to me as hysteria around this topic of AI. And when someone does stop you in the hallway, a board member, an executive, a colleague that says, you know, we're behind, we've got to start using AI, it's a great thing to take a deep breath, smile, and just share their enthusiasm and excitement and let them know you already are. And then you can talk about additional ways you might be able to enhance it further. It's also a great opportunity, particularly in the area of databases and CRMs, dashboard and analytics, and in your vendor partner and suppliers. Ask them how they're using AI in their toolkits, within their platforms, within their day-to-day usage. It's really going to become incumbent on us as leaders to ensure that we are knowledgeable about the role that AI is playing in the work that we do. And we have a lot of control over that in the direct tools that we adopt, but it's important for us to understand that in the secondary relationships that we have as well too. So this is hopefully one of the big takeaways for today is to spend some time looking at the tools you're already using and get curious around where and how AI is showing up in those tools, whether it be generative, machine learning, or deep learning, or another form. And then also to start through that conversation to look at areas where there might be additional opportunities for you as well. So hopefully that's a little takeaway that you guys can put into action. All right, so let's dive into the plan. This is a very, very high level framework. Something that if time allowed, we would go really deep into. And there's actually some really fantastic methodologies that the broader team at Amazon uses, and you can access them on the Amazon website. Some of you may have heard of Amazon's working backwards philosophy, or something called a PR FAQ, press release and frequently asked questions. Both of those are tools that provide a framework for conversation and for planning and for strategy. So this is an outline, if you will, as a way to help guide conversation around the evaluation, adoption, and growth of technology, and in particular, cloud-based technology and some AI tools within your organizations. So 3 questions to start. If everyone could grab a pen and paper and answer these 3 questions for yourself. And then when you're done in the chat, were you able to answer 1 of them, 2 of them, or all 3 of them? So the first question is my organization's data stored on premises, in the cloud, or both? So if you don't know what it means to be on premises, that's usually you've seen pictures of it, the large old computer, with a lot of wires coming out the back. It's usually in a special room that's temperature controlled versus the cloud. Question 2 is my organization's data in multiple places or in a single place? So many aspire to have a single source of truth. Many have not yet reached that aspiration. So do you have your information in both a CRM and an automated marketing tool? Do you have your information in both an online fundraising platform and maybe on a spreadsheet on someone's computer? And then lastly, was your team specifically, the team that you sit on, directly involved in the creation of your organization's data strategy? Which leads with an assumption that your organization has a data strategy. So needless to say, it's a little bit of a precursor to question 3. But if you don't know, then the answer to that is probably no. And if you do know that you have a data strategy, was your team directly involved? So it looks like we've got, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your name correctly, Amarella. It looks like you've got all of them. That's amazing. Congratulations. We have quite a few 2s. Katie, looks like you've got all 3 as well. Teresa, all 3 as well. That's great. And Patty. So a lot of folks know all of these answers. So I would put you guys on the mature path already. Well done. I ask these 3 questions for a couple of reasons, which might seem obvious to those of you who answered yes to all 3. First and foremost, if your data is on-prem, there are going to be aspects of current technology and innovations, particularly AI, that are going to be either unavailable to you or more limited. So there's a lot of reason that you might have data on-prem. It still exists in quite a few nonprofits across the country. It's good for you to know where your data is. It's good for you to know why your data is in different places. In a day and age where data really is the economy in which we work, even if you aren't in a traditional data role, knowing that information helps make you a better marketer, a better ops leader, a better fundraiser, a better program delivery, etc. The question about the multiple places is because, again, if we don't have unified data, we can't be as enriched or complete in our thinking and our strategy development. Now, I do want to distinguish there is a difference between unifying data and having a single source of truth. A single source of truth is something that a lot of folks work towards. I think it is an incredibly high standard that is challenging for many to meet. A different way to think of data unification is sort of a testing environment, if you will, or a hypothesis lab, if you will. If you take data and you're able to unify it and you're able to look at it, do you wonder different things? Do you hypothesize differently? Are you inspired for different tests? Even without necessarily taking all of that data in its unified form and putting it into your CRM, oftentimes a data lake is an area where people think differently, and then they run tests in their traditional systems that allow them to assess if it's worthy of actually bringing data over in a more formal way. So that's why the data unification in the multiple places is such an important question. And then finally, the data strategy piece is probably my current soapbox. In that, what I find often when I'm meeting with leaders is that data strategy is thought through from a practical and technical perspective. And that can be limited when it does not include the perspective of more stakeholders across the organization. I'm always fascinated by what happens when I sit in a room of people who sit in different seats within the same organization. And the ideas and the thinking and the business requirements and the concerns that they bring to the table, it really does make our data strategy more powerful, more effective, and ultimately our donors and constituents' experiences more enriched and our ability to deliver on mission more possible when we are benefiting from the full perspective that we have across our organization. So if you're in charge of leading data strategy, please, please, please reach across to your colleagues at other teams and other departments and make sure that they're represented. If you are sitting in one of those seats and you don't feel like you have been engaged in that, worthwhile to find out who's in charge of the data strategy for your organization and inviting yourself to a future meeting so that they can benefit from hearing your perspective as well. Okay, so once we have those sort of elements in place, important to think from the inside out. So you may remember earlier I showed the picture of the glacier, right? And there was the element below the water and then the element above the water. So think of infrastructure as the elements below the water. Another way to think of it is the foundation of your house, okay? So you've got this gorgeous new plot of land. You're going to build this beautiful home. You're going to get those windows and curtains and furniture you've always dreamed of. Would really be a bummer to do all that work and invest all that time and money if you did not have a solid foundation to support that home over the course of your time living there. That foundation is our infrastructure. It's security, it's governance, it's compliance, it's disaster recovery. It's where we can find areas for operational efficiency. It's things like data visualization and call centers. So think about that infrastructure. As someone said in a meeting I was in last week, this is the reminder that you've got to eat your broccoli, right? I'd rather just cut to the delicious buttery mashed potatoes and maybe even dessert, but I need some vegetable too. So think about your infrastructure, make sure that it is sound before you start diving into some of the exciting and interesting innovations that are emerging. Generative AI, insights that are derived from engagements, AI enhancements around operational efficiency or intelligent search, virtual events, and all those types of things. So important to remember that this broccoli eating piece is a really important part of this journey, and to resist the desire sometimes to fast forward through it as we dive into some of the innovations. The philosophy then to follow really starts with this element of curiosity. And it sounds like we have a team on this call that has already sort of embraced this belief, which is great. So you'll be even stronger amplifiers out in the world. If you don't already have a regular cadence of communication or relationship with your IT team, that's a really great place to start. Get to know them. get to know what they're working on, get to know what stresses them out, get to know the things that make their world challenging so that you are approaching them with curiosity to understand and see them, which will come into fold later on when we start to be interested in collaborating and potentially even asking of things from them. For those that were not able to answer the question of where your data lives or if it's in one place, a great place to start is to get really curious about that. If you haven't participated in or seen your data strategy, if you aren't sure if you have one, get really curious around that. And then, of course, understanding your internal resources. And that's important because as a consultant, it used to drive me crazy when people would come in and come with these big, grand ideas that did not recognize the reality of the environment in which a leader was trying to navigate. And we need to plan realistically. There are lots of resources available to help augment, but it's good to know which ones you have in-house and which ones you really want to keep and maintain in-house. Not everything needs to be an in-house expertise, so it is good to get really clear on which ones currently are and which ones you want to maintain in that way. As that curiosity begins, it quickly evolves into the world of innovation, where you're starting to then think and look on a multi-year horizon. You're looking at business productivity as an actual value to mission. You're starting to develop proofs of concept, which often, at least in the technology space, come with incredible funding and support from partners like AWS, which is amazing. And then for me, the most exciting thing, and the reason that I ultimately took my role at AWS, was the ability to impact at scale. And sometimes that impact is in a changed behavior or a changed process. Sometimes that impact is actually in mission delivery. When it's both, it's really the perfect world between the two. So following this philosophy of beginning with curiosity in a couple of these areas that we've suggested, you've probably thought of a few more on your own, and allowing that to then lead to innovation can be a really powerful framework to use as you start to consider the process of adoption for your organization. All right, a couple of quick sample use cases, and then I will open it up to questions in the chat. Chatbots. This is an area where I think there's some proverbial low-hanging fruit. If you don't already have a chatbot on your website, it's certainly something to look at and consider. I'm also seeing a lot of excitement around some of the new chatbots that are available internally for staff. And in both cases, what the chatbot allows is more efficiency in accessing information, converting it into languages that are native to the person that is doing the search. And more so, coming back to that use of machine learning, it allows you to watch and monitor trends. So an output of a chatbot is not just the user being able to access the information they want quickly, but then as a business leader, you can reflect on the analysis of that chatbot over the course of 1, 2, 10 months more, and you can start to see, are there similarities in what's being asked? From an internal perspective, what you come to find is areas where you might need to do additional training, where you might need additional resourcing. From an external perspective, you start to see areas that are really of interest to your user, and it allows you to enrich the way that you are communicating with them and the resources that you're making available to them. Don't forget that chatbots are not just web-based. They can include voice, SMS, call, all kinds of things. So this is one area that you can look at in specific departments like development operations, donation pages, tribute and sustainer programs, or you can look at holistically across an organization's external presence or internal teams. Leading by example, another category is experience. So when we talk about that data unification, when we talk about that ability to really understand and see and communicate with our donor in a way that is, you remember the phrase, personalized, timely, and relevant, what the data lake or some form of data unification allows us to do is bring together data, and the phrases that you may hear are structured or unstructured. That basically just means, are all the columns in the Excel spreadsheet the same and clean, or is it sort of chaos? Both forms can actually be ingested now. And then it allows you to assess using tools where are opportunities for segmentation, personalization, testing, enhanced experiences. This is an area where also, as you think about data unification, in particular a data lake, it's great to think about third-party data. So Amazon makes its commercial data sets available for enrichment all the time. Many of you are probably part of different types of append groups that you can pull in the data. So this is, again, we're not pulling everything into your CRM. We're not going through lots of customizations there. We're taking all this data, we're looking at it in the data unification body of water. For this purpose, we're calling it a data lake. We're seeing if it inspires any new thinking to do some testing. And in those particular cases, it allows us to rethink our approach to acquisition or recruitment. We certainly can reframe ways that we're approaching our stewardship, and lots of great opportunities as it relates to mid-level and sustainer retention over the course of the years and how we come at that business. This is a sampling of a couple of other things that came to mind. I decided to just summarize them. Some of these are very specific, like automatic speech recognition. Others are a little bit broader, like fraud detection. There's another really interesting area that's emerging, and I wish it were inherently intertwined, which is the responsible and ethical use of AI in the work that we do. It is paramount for all of us to know and recognize that it is our responsibility to have a standard for the responsible and ethical use of technology and AI in our business. And in doing this, there are ways that you can actually use the technology to look for bias, to address inconsistencies, and allow you to then offset and augment for them. So tons and tons of great opportunities. Usually the challenge is picking ones that you want to start with as opposed to finding one at all. So hopefully some of these are triggering some ideas for you, either in your specific department and team or within your organization. All right, I am going to leave three offers on the screen while we switch to questions. The first is something called the Imagine Grant. So the team that I sit on at AWS is called AWS for Nonprofits. There are about 250 of us, and we are all available to serve the strategic business needs of nonprofit leaders who are curious about using technology to drive their outcomes. So we are no-fee resources. We are here as supporters and passionate leaders in our space. And we think through challenges with our leaders and our customers in order to do that. And there's about 65,000 customers that work with us around the globe, and then many, many more that work with partners or work with tools like a Salesforce that's built on AWS. The reason that I give you that background is because we are not a traditional foundation. We are not the foundation of Amazon. We are actually a strategic business partner to the nonprofit world. And as that, we are thrilled to be in our 8th year of the Imagine grants. And this year we just launched a brand new one. So there are 3 grants available only to nonprofits. They come with unrestricted cash that ranges from $50,000 up to $200,000. And there's 3 categories depending on what you're interested in, and multiple winners in each. And so I really encourage you to take a look. It's a fantastic funding source. It's a fantastic catalyst if you're looking to accelerate adoption of some of these capabilities that I talked about today, like a data lake, like use of AI. There's some really great opportunities there. The second is a content piece. It's called the Cloud Insights Report. This is a body of research that was actually done in order to understand the mindset of nonprofit leaders relative to their understanding of some of the concepts that we just talked about. And in doing that, what you'll find is this really incredible body of work that not only grounds where our industry stands, which is quite frankly more advanced than I think sometimes we give ourselves credit for, but it also has some very practical resources around how to help support your organization. So I think there's like a 5 or 7 question quiz that you can take. It tells you where you particularly fall. And then the Cloud Insights Report is a resource that sort of serves as your guide based on that information. Last but not least, if you have any questions that I didn't cover today, or if you want to pick my brain on something else, there's my LinkedIn. I try to be active on it. So happy to go ahead and connect with you there. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm happy to switch to questions. I don't think I have the ability to take you off mute, but if anyone has a question they want to pop into the chat, I would be happy to go ahead and take them now. And for those of you that need to log off and take 10 minutes back in your day, I want to thank you for joining us and for spending the time. Hopefully you found a couple things in here that are valuable. So any questions from anyone before we pause? Okay, then I will thank you guys all so much. It was a real pleasure to be with you today. Thank you to my fun hosts for everything that you did leading up to today. And here's to our industry really leading forward in a more powerful way, leveraging technology to do it.
Thank you everyone for joining. We will be posting a recording on the website for anyone that's interested.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
I was trying to get off mute.
great work.
Yes, Kelly, you're amazing. You are awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
The AWS Imagine grant, I'm sure it has instructions, but can any nonprofit apply for that?
Yes, great question. So there are the instructions that are available to download right now, and you actually can't submit your application until starting May 1st, and then you have about a 1-month window to do it. There are some restrictions around who can apply. I think you have to be a 501c3 based in the United States, although there is a grant also for Australia and Ireland. So there are some requirements in there, but they're minimal. The bigger opportunity is to be really thoughtful in which grant you apply for. So you can only apply for one. And as you look at them, they try to be really specific in guiding you. For example, the Momentum to Modernize is really about the things that were under the surface in the glacier. They're really about getting your infrastructure sorted well. Whereas our newest grant is around generative AI and projects that are going to leverage that. So the instructions will guide you through that, but take a look, and if you have any issues, let me know.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love that someone came off mute. That was so lovely. All right, well, thank you guys so much, and I'll look forward to connecting with you guys on LinkedIn.